First contact failure. The scout vessel Starweaver drifted silently through the void, its ion engines barely a whisper against the endless black. Commander Elix Zorn stood on the observation deck, all four of his emerald eyes fixed on the small blue-green planet growing steadily larger on the main view screen. His exoskeleton gleamed under the soft ambient lighting as he tapped a sequence into his wrist console. "Navigation Officer Tress, confirm our position," he said, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his native Miraxian into standardized galactic common. "Coordinates confirmed, Commander. We are approaching the third planet of this unremarkable star system," Tress replied, her tentacles flowing gracefully across the navigation panel. "According to archives, this is a Class 3 developing world. Minimal technology, primitive tribal societies. Perfect for our survey mission." Zorn nodded, his cranial ridge expanding slightly in satisfaction. The Miraxian exploratory fleet had been charting this sector for nearly a full cycle, documenting potential worlds for future reference by the Galactic Concord. This particular planet wasn't even their main objective, merely a curiosity to be briefly studied before continuing to the resource-rich gas giants beyond. "Science Officer Kelty, what does our database say about the dominant species?" Zorn asked, turning to the smallest crew member, whose translucent skin pulsed with neural activity. Kelty's voice was soft but precise. "Bipedal mammals called humans. Last survey, conducted 300 standard cycles ago, indicates early agricultural development, basic metallurgy, and rudimentary social structures. Highly territorial, but lacking any significant technological capabilities. Assessment: harmless. Security Chief Vax, a hulking figure whose armored carapace bore the scars of a dozen expeditions, grunted dismissively. Another primitive world to catalog. Perhaps we can collect some specimens before." His words died as a violent shudder ran through the ship, sending crew members sprawling across their stations. Warning lights flashed crimson across every console. "Report," Zorn demanded, pulling himself upright. Engineering Officer Mira's panicked voice came through the comms. "Massive cascade failure in the primary drive. The power core is destabilizing." "Cause?" Zorn snapped. "Unknown. It's as if something is interfering with our systems, some kind of energy field we've never encountered before." Tress's tentacles flew across her console. "Commander, we're losing altitude rapidly. Gravitational pull of the planet is accelerating our descent. Impact in approximately 12 minutes. Can we restore power?" Zorn asked, fighting to keep his voice level. "Negative. Secondary systems are responding, but they're insufficient for escape velocity," Mira replied. "We can perhaps manage a controlled crash landing." Zorn's inner eyelids closed briefly in resignation. "Then that's what we'll do. Tress, find us somewhere remote. Minimal chances of encountering the native population. Scanning. There's a forested region in the northern hemisphere. Low population density according to our sensors. Make for it. All crew, secure for emergency landing protocols." The Starweaver screamed through Earth's atmosphere, its heat shields glowing orange against the night sky. Inside, the crew braced as Tress fought for control, using the remaining thrusters to slow their descent. The ship plowed through the upper canopy of a dense forest, shearing off trees before finally coming to rest in a small clearing, the impact driving it several meters into the soft earth. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the soft patter of debris falling onto the hull. "Status report," Zorn finally managed, wiping iridescent blue fluid from a cut on his forehead. "Hull integrity at 62%, Vax reported. Life support stable. Defensive systems online, but at reduced capacity. Drive core completely inoperable," Mira added grimly. "We're grounded, Commander." Kelty was staring at her console with all three of her eye stalks extended in disbelief. "Commander, I'm detecting extensive artificial structures across this planet. Power grids, communication networks, artificial satellites in orbit. That's impossible, Zorn said. The database clearly stated. The database is wrong, Kelty interrupted, something she would never do under normal circumstances. These humans, they've advanced far beyond our records. I'm detecting nuclear energy signatures, global digital networks, and what appears to be primitive space technology. Zorn felt a cold dread creeping through his carapace. How primitive? They've reached their own satellite and appear to have established a small orbital station. 300 cycles, Vax muttered. How could any species advance from stone tools to spaceflight in just 300 cycles? Before anyone could answer, Tress called out, "Commander, I'm detecting approaching vehicles. Multiple signals converging on our position." "Impossible," Zorn said. "We're in the middle of nowhere. How could they have found us so quickly?" Kelty's skin had gone almost transparent with stress. "They're tracking us. These humans have detection systems far beyond what a Class 3 civilization should possess. They've been monitoring their skies." Zorn moved quickly to the view screen, switching to external cameras. What he saw sent a wave of alarm through his neural network. Approaching through the trees were several armored vehicles, their designs clearly military in nature. Behind them came larger transports, and in the distance, the distinctive thrum of aerial craft. "They have organized military response capabilities," Vax said, voice tight. "Armed forces with what appear to be projectile weapons and explosive devices. Defensive posture only," Zorn ordered. "No aggressive actions. Remember galactic protocol for first contact situations." "This isn't a first contact situation," Kelty said quietly. "The Concorde made contact 300 cycles ago. But they were different then. These humans have undergone unprecedented technological evolution." The vehicles had formed a perimeter around the crash site, bright lights cutting through the darkness to illuminate the Starweaver. Armored figures emerged, weapons raised. "They're establishing a containment zone," Vax observed. "Standard military procedure for an unknown threat." Zorn made a quick decision. "Activate the universal translator. Open a communication channel." "Channel open," Tress confirmed. Zorn took a deep breath. "This is Commander Elix Zorn of the Myraxian exploratory vessel Starweaver. We come in peace. Our ship has suffered a critical malfunction, forcing an emergency landing. We seek only to make repairs and depart without incident." For several tense moments, there was no response. Then a voice came through, translated by the ship's systems. "This is Colonel Elena Hayes, United States Special Operations Command. You have entered sovereign airspace and landed on protected territory without authorization. Remain in your vessel. Any attempt to exit will be considered hostile action." Zorn exchanged alarmed glances with his crew. "We mean no harm," he tried again. "We are peaceful explorers." "All explorers bring their weapons," came the terse reply. "We've detected energy signatures consistent with advanced weaponry aboard your vessel. Our response will be proportional to any perceived threat." Kelty was frantically scanning through intercepted data streams. "Commander, I'm accessing their global information network. These humans are exceptionally aggressive. Their history is marked by constant warfare. They've developed weapons of mass destruction, and their entertainment media is filled with scenarios of hostile alien invasions. They've been expecting us," Vax realized. "Not us specifically, but the concept of extraterrestrial contact. And they've been preparing for war." Outside, more military vehicles arrived. Heavy weapons were being positioned around the clearing. Aircraft circled overhead. "This is wrong," Zorn said, his voice hollow. "The Concorde's assessment was completely inaccurate. This isn't a primitive world ripe for study. It's a powder keg of technological advancement and militaristic paranoia. And we just landed in their backyard," Mira added grimly. Zorn's mind raced through their options, each worse than the last. The Starweaver was crippled, surrounded by a species that had somehow compressed millennia of development into just 3 centuries, a species clearly prepared for the very scenario they now found themselves in. We need to buy time, he decided finally. Mira, how long to repair the drive core? At least 48 local rotations, assuming we can fabricate the necessary components. Colonel Hayes, Zorn transmitted, we understand your concern. We propose a diplomatic exchange. One representative from each side, unarmed, to discuss our situation. After a long pause, the human's voice returned. One representative, unarmed, at dawn. As the transmission ended, Vax moved closer to Zorn. Commander, with respect, this is extremely dangerous. We know nothing about these humans except that they're warlike and have been dreaming about killing aliens for generations. We have no choice, Zorn replied quietly. Our long-range communicator was damaged in the crash. We can't contact the Concorde for extraction. Our only option is diplomacy. And if diplomacy fails? Kelty asked, her voice barely audible. Zorn's gaze returned to the view screen, where more human military forces continued to arrive, their weapons trained on the Starweaver. Then we landed on Earth, and instantly made the worst mistake in Myraxian exploration history. The human factor. Dawn broke over the forest, golden light filtering through the trees to illuminate the standoff below. Inside the Starweaver, Commander Zorn prepared for what might be the most important diplomatic mission of his career. He'd removed his ceremonial armor, leaving only the basic exoskeleton covering that his species required in Earth's gravity. The atmospheric composition is breathable, Kelty assured him, running final checks on his translator. But the oxygen content is higher than our homeworld. You may experience slight euphoria or dizziness. I doubt it, Zorn replied grimly. Fear tends to counteract such effects. Security Chief Vax stood nearby, clearly unhappy. I should accompany you. No. One representative, as agreed. If this goes poorly. Zorn hesitated. Initiate the emergency beacon. The Concorde must know what happened here. And they must understand what these humans are capable of. The main hatch hissed open, extending a ramp to the ground below. Zorn stepped forward, feeling the unfamiliar weight of Earth's gravity pressing against his limbs. The clearing was filled with military vehicles and personnel, weapons still trained on the ship. Directly ahead, a small table had been set up in neutral territory. A single human figure approached from the opposite side. Female, Zorn noted, according to their dimorphic biology. She wore no obvious weapons, though a small device was clipped to her ear, likely a communication unit. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore a uniform distinct from the soldiers surrounding them. They reached the table simultaneously. Commander Zorn, she said, her voice rendered perfectly by his translator. Colonel Hayes, he acknowledged. Not quite. I'm Dr. Samantha Reyes, xenobiologist. Colonel Hayes is observing. She gestured vaguely toward the military perimeter. I expected to meet your military leadership, Zorn admitted. Dr. Reyes smiled thinly. They thought it wise to send someone who might actually understand what you are, rather than someone trained to shoot first and ask questions later. Zorn felt his cranial ridge expand slightly in surprise at the human's bluntness. A wise decision. Now, she continued, placing a small recording device on the table, let's be clear about a few things. Your arrival has triggered every defense system we have. There are currently 17 nations with nuclear weapons on high alert. 3 carrier strike groups are positioning offshore. In short, Commander, the entire planet is prepared for war. We are not invaders, Zorn stated firmly. We are explorers. Our mission is scientific, not military. Perhaps, Dr. Reyes conceded. But from our perspective, an advanced alien civilization just crash-landed in rural Wyoming. Your ship is armed. Your technology is beyond our understanding, and our history is filled with cautionary tales about what happens when technologically superior visitors arrive unexpectedly. Zorn considered his words carefully. Your assessment is not without merit, but I assure you, the Galactic Concorde has strict protocols regarding developing worlds. Interference is forbidden. Developing worlds. Dr. Reyes raised an eyebrow. Is that how you classify Earth? According to our last survey, yes. Conducted approximately 300 of your years ago. Dr. Reyes actually laughed, a sharp sound that made Zorn flinch. 300 years ago, we were still using horses for transportation and dying from simple infections. We've advanced somewhat since then. We've noticed, Zorn replied dryly. Your technological development rate is unprecedented. Most species take thousands of years to progress from basic agriculture to spaceflight. You've done it in mere centuries. While they spoke, Zorn was receiving continuous updates from Kelty through his neural implant. She was analyzing the human information networks, building a more comprehensive picture of Earth civilization. What she was finding was increasingly alarming. Your species appears to be driven by constant competition, Zorn observed. You've structured your entire global civilization around competitive models. Economic, military, technological. Survival of the fittest, Dr. Reyes shrugged. It's messy and often brutal, but effective. And dangerous, Zorn added. Your nuclear arsenals alone could render this planet uninhabitable, a deterrent that's worked so far. Zorn decided to change tactics. Our drive system is damaged. We require approximately 48 hours to effect repairs before we can depart. And then what? Dr. Reyes leaned forward. You return to your Concord and report that the primitives have developed nuclear weapons and rudimentary space travel. That would be standard protocol, yes. Dr. Reyes's expression hardened. And then what happens to Earth, Commander? Quarantine. Containment. Perhaps your Concord decides we're too dangerous to be allowed to develop further. The accusation struck Zorn like a physical blow. The Concord does not interfere. But it does observe. It did send you. And now it will know about us. She tapped her fingers on the table. You see our dilemma. In his neural feed, Kelty was becoming increasingly agitated. Commander, I've analyzed their conflict history. These humans have never achieved global peace. They exist in a constant state of competition and alliance building. They're discussing us on their networks now. Public opinion is divided between scientific curiosity and military caution. Their leadership structures are fragmenting over how to respond. Your species is remarkably adaptable, Zorn said carefully. The Concord values diversity. Your development would be studied, not halted. Forgive us if we're not reassured by that, Dr. Reyes replied. Your ship contains technology centuries beyond our capabilities. The temptation to acquire it will be strong for certain factions. Commander, Kelty's urgent message came through. Military channels are discussing a preemptive strike. They believe the diplomatic exchange is a distraction while we repair our weapon systems. Zorn felt a cold dread spreading through him. Dr. Reyes, I must insist on good faith. We have no hostile intentions. I believe you, she said, surprising him. But I'm not the one you need to convince. At that moment, a series of sharp commands echoed across the clearing. Military personnel began moving with new purpose, taking up offensive positions. What's happening? Zorn demanded. Dr. Reyes touched her earpiece, her expression darkening. It seems our time has run out. The Security Council has voted. They're going to secure your vessel. That would be unwise, Zorn warned, standing abruptly. Our defensive systems are automated. Then deactivate them, she countered. I cannot from here. And my crew has orders to defend themselves if threatened. The standoff was deteriorating rapidly. In his neural feed, Zorn could see Vax preparing the ship's defense grid. Mira was reporting that the drive repairs were nowhere near complete. They were trapped, surrounded by a species that had decided they represented an existential threat. Then Dr. Reyes did something unexpected. She switched off her recording device and leaned closer. Commander, listen carefully. In exactly 73 seconds, there will be a power fluctuation in the eastern perimeter. It will last 14 seconds. During that time, return to your ship. Tell your crew to shut down all systems except life support. Make your vessel appear completely dormant. Zorn stared at her. Why would you help us? Because I've spent my career theorizing about intelligent life beyond Earth. Because first contact shouldn't end with bloodshed. And because I believe you when you say you mean no harm. She checked her watch. 60 seconds. What will happen after we power down? I've convinced certain parties that your technology might be electromagnetic pulse resistant. They're going to try a localized EMP strike instead of kinetic weapons. When that happens, appear affected. Then negotiate from a position they understand. Vulnerability. Zorn's cranial ridge expanded fully in surprise. You're betraying your own military leadership. I'm preventing an interstellar diplomatic disaster, she corrected. 30 seconds. Will you trust me, Commander? It went against every protocol, every instinct. But Zorn recognized the logic. Yes. Go. Now. True to her word, the lights along the eastern perimeter suddenly flickered and died. In the confusion, Zorn sprinted back to the Starweaver, his exoskeleton compensating for Earth's gravity. He barely made it inside before the ramp closed behind him. Power down everything except basic life support, he ordered his stunned crew. Make it look like we're defenseless. Commander, Vax questioned. Trust me, it's our only chance. Minutes later, a concentrated electromagnetic pulse washed over the Starweaver. The ship's systems, already powered down, showed no external change. Through minimal sensors, they watched as the human military cautiously approached. Now what? Mira asked. Now, Zorn said, we negotiate as equals. Not as advanced beings or primitive ones, but as two species who've both learned the same harsh lesson about survival. And we offer them something they value more than our technology. Which is? Kelty wondered. Knowledge, Zorn replied. Not of weapons or power sources, but of the galaxy beyond their world. The perspective that only we can provide. 3 days later, the repaired Starweaver rose from Earth, its departure witnessed by a carefully selected international delegation. The agreement was simple. The Concord would acknowledge Earth as an emerging spacefaring civilization with the right to self-determination. In exchange, humanity would continue its development without the Concord's interference, but with awareness of the greater galactic community. As Earth receded on the viewscreen, Kelty approached Zorn on the observation deck. The Concord may not approve of the arrangement you've made. The Concord didn't experience humanity firsthand, Zorn replied. We did, and we nearly paid the ultimate price for underestimating them. Do you think they'll ever join the greater community? Zorn considered the question as he watched the blue-green world growing smaller behind them. Eventually, but on their terms, not ours. And when they do. He paused, his cranial ridge expanding slightly in what his species considered a smile. The galaxy will never be the same.